Morning decisions. A creamy mocha frappuccino drink? A sweet vanilla? Maybe a smooth caramel or that white chocolate mocha. Whichever you choose, delicious coffee awaits. Start your day with bottled Starbucks Frappuccino drinks. Pick up a bottle near you wherever you buy your groceries.
The Stone Zone. Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome. You are entering the Stone Zone, and I'm your genial host, Roger Stone. Last week, Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna of Florida announced that she would be introducing the American Privacy Restoration Act in order to fully repeal the Patriot Act, end the surveillance state, and restore the Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. For over 2 decades, rogue actors within U.S. intelligence agencies have used the Patriot Act to create the most sophisticated, unaccountable surveillance apparatus in the Western world. That's what Luna told Breitbart News. The Patriot Act was the reform passed in the immediate fervor of September 11th, 2001, the attacks on the World Trade Center, and the Pentagon has vastly expanded government surveillance powers ever since. This allows the NSA to peer into any individual citizen's phone calls, text messages, emails, or metadata without a warrant as long as they are considered, quote, relevant to a terror case. Now, journalist Glenn Greenwald noted the extreme overreaching powers of the Patriot Act were always sold as being temporary, just a temporary solution, they told us, to the problems of radical Islamic terrorism in the aftermath of September 11th. But has become anything but temporary, with these powers being automatically rubber-stamped by Congress every 4 years or so. The September 11th official story has certainly begun to unravel. The idea that a ragtag group of evil Muslims who hate America because of the country's freedom were able to circumvent the most sophisticated air defense system the world has ever known is under serious question. Architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth have pointed out many discrepancies in the supposed evidence backing the government's story, including, of course, the smoke and gum of World Trade Center Building 7 collapsing into its own footprint without having been hit by anything. The Patriot Act has become a staple of the federal bureaucracy since its inception and has been expanded upon immensely. It grew infamous, and the indefinite detention provisions of the National Defense Authorization Act of 2012 made it worse. These provisions allow for American citizens to be detained under virtually any pretense for as long as a corrupt prosecutor or bureaucrat decides that that person was an, quote, associated force of terrorism. And thus, due process was eviscerated. Civil liberties became a thing of the past. And on the watch of a supposedly pro-freedom Republican Party, the Patriot Act was passed. Now, when Trump ran for president in 2016, the true agenda behind measures such as the Patriot Act came to light. You'll remember that secret FISA court warrants authorized the illegal spying on Donald Trump's campaign in order to frame Trump as a Russian agent, to undermine his presidency, and make a mockery of the Democrat process and to affirm the supremacy of the permanent shadow government. Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna's proposed legislation is important because the Republican Party needs to be all in for its repudiation of country club establishment republicanism. The party must reconcile the sins of its most recent past. And frankly, the neocon theories that were rejected by President Donald Trump when he visited Saudi Arabia can now be brought full circle with the repeal of the Patriot Act. Equally heinous, in my opinion, is Real ID. Now, this came as a kind of a shock to me. Last week, after nearly 2 weeks of implementation and delays, I learned that the federal government's new identification requirements for traveling by plane domestically are going into effect as of May 16th. This federally compliant ID card, known as Real ID, can only be attained with specific records and documents laid out by the federal government. It's labeled by a black or gold star in the upper right corner. Now, even though the Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem promises that at least initially, people without a real ID will only have to face some, quote, extra scrutiny at security checkpoints. It's safe to assume, as the full requirements set in over the next several weeks and months, some number of people will show up to airports unaware that they no longer have the documentation required to board their plane. Previously, a driver's license or a passport would suffice. And because the process of getting through most domestic airports was grueling enough because of the deadline and the backup, many expect air travel to be especially difficult during the transition. Because of the absoluteness of this new requirement and the harsh punishments for noncompliance, just picture what would happen to you if you try to get into a federal building or onto a plane without the accepted forms of ID. It can be easy to write off real ID requirements as some kind of new rule, which, while annoying, is probably being implemented for good reason. But it's not. Conservatives and libertarians have opposed this kind of national ID for decades. As I pointed out, the law itself, the Real ID Act, was passed way back in 2005. Like the Patriot Act, it's one of the many measures rolled out in the wake of the 9/11 attacks that was presented to the public as being necessary to ensure that similar attacks would never happen again. Now we're being told that one of the principal purposes for Real ID is to ensure that people who are not entitled to Social Security benefits or welfare benefits are receiving them, and to make sure that only those who are legally eligible to vote can do so. It sounds good, but pardon me if I'm skeptical. The original bill specified the federal government would refuse to accept any form of ID that did not meet the requirements that Congress has passed as of May of 2008. As that date drew closer, a few states had implemented the new provisions. Some governors vocally refused to comply because they oppose what is, in effect, the implementation of a national identification database. That prompted the Department of Homeland Security to delay the deadline several times. First, it was then a complicated range of deadlines from 2013 to 2017 based on age and state of residence, and then to one universal deadline in October of 2020. Then, of course, the pandemic hit, and the deadline was extended again to 2021, then 2023, and finally to today. That's right, it is upon us. Now, if these new ID requirements were as crucial to the safety of air travelers and the American public at large as the federal government has claimed, the sheer time it's taken to implement it would be unacceptable. That alone is a sign that perhaps the federal government's motivations are not what they are telling us they are. Indeed, if you look back at how and why of the 9/11 attacks, it's clear that preventing a similar attack at most is an extremely thin excuse for this new federal ID system, which can be used to track every single U.S. citizen. None of the 9/11 hijackers used fake IDs or pretended to be someone else when they checked in and boarded their flights. At the time, an ID check was only required during check-in, but the rule has not always been enforced. All of the hijackers who were asked to show ID presented legitimate forms of identification. Most of them happened to be foreign passports. All of them were Saudis. All three hijackers were allowed to board their planes, so it's hard to see how anyone can seriously argue with us today that some new ID requirement that would have done nothing to stop the 9/11 attacks are crucial, preventing future attacks of the same nature. The truth is that the Real ID is just the latest chapter in the federal government's 20-year-plus campaign to use 9/11 as an excuse to protect and expand its power. I am opposed to Real ID. I think it is being used to keep track of every American citizen. If Kristi Noem has illusions about running for president, and clearly with a $200 million advertising budget that the Department of Homeland Security has, in which she tells people in the country illegally that they should go to an app and self-deport, she clearly does have political aspirations, but I think her advocacy of Real ID among conservatives will handicap any chance she has of political advancement. Meanwhile, Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, has fired top officials leading the National Intelligence Council, who whistleblowers have described as radically opposed to Trump. Tulsi Gabbard has moved the agency to the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, ODNI, to ensure that she can block any politicization of intelligence. Yesterday, Gabbard fired Mike Collins, who was serving as the acting chair of the National Intelligence Council, and his deputy, a woman named Maria Langen-Riekhoff. Collins has also whistleblower complaints against him for political bias and for deliberately undermining the incoming Trump administration. Various officials reported that Collins was closely associated with former CIA official Mike Morell. Morell is the former deputy director of the CIA who worked to write the public letter in 2020, along with 51 other current or former intelligence officials, saying that Hunter Biden's laptop had, quote, all the classic earmarks of a Russian information operation, and to get signatures from top intelligence officials. As for Langen-Riekhoff, officials say she has been a key advocate for diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives, and someone who whistleblowers allege is radically opposed to Trump. Meanwhile, Gabbard is moving the National Intelligence Council from the CIA to her own office, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, to directly hold accountable any improper action or politicization of intelligence. Many intel community leakers are career bureaucrats entrenched in Washington politics. It takes time to weed them out and fire them, but I give Tulsi Gabbard enormous credit for her insistence on doing so. So far, Gabbard has referred 3 intelligence community professionals to the U.S. Department of Justice for criminal prosecution over alleged leaks of classified information. Politicization of our intelligence and leaking classified information puts our nation's security at risk and must end, Gabbard said back in April. Those who leak classified information will be found and will be held accountable to the fullest extent of the law. Meanwhile, the greatest title history can bestow is that of peacemaker. Donald Trump is returning from his triumphant visit to Saudi Arabia, and I think we're looking at the great Trump reset. It doesn't really get more America first than this. I believe this is the official birth of the Trump doctrine. Now, the president has reaffirmed the borders of Israel and their right to defend themselves from outside attacks. America and Israel will never, however, enjoy a special relationship where the Israelis have a disproportionate effect on American foreign policy. Donald Trump and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu appear to be at an impasse over policy regarding a whole host of issues going forward. It wasn't just Gaza and the civilian deaths and starvation there, but also Syria's borders, the fights with Turkey, and the U.S.-led negotiations with Iran. It is amazing. The president has made this incredible change, moving away from the neocons, looking for an excuse for war with Iran, and moving us into a whole new era of prosperity and security. Meanwhile, the president has secured massive investments for the United States. We'll be right back in the Stone Zone to break some of those down for you. And then later in the show, we talk to Joel Gilbert, who has a new blockbuster article exposing the corruption of New York Attorney General Letitia James. You're in the Stone Zone. Whatever you do, don't touch that dial.
The Stone Zone
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're back in the Stone Zone. President Donald Trump is in Qatar today. Yesterday, President Donald Trump and Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman announced that Saudi Arabia had agreed to a $1 trillion in commercial deals with American companies. Quote, with the help of the people of the Middle East, the people in this room, partners throughout the region, the golden age of the Middle East can proceed right alongside of us, Trump said at the U.S.-Saudi Investment Summit in Riyadh. We will work together. We will be together. We will succeed together. We will win together, and we will always be friends. The $1 trillion number roughly matches Saudi Arabia's entire yearly gross domestic product. Gives you some idea how big this deal is. Talk about the art of the deal. If you take a look at other presidencies, they wouldn't do $1 trillion sometimes in years, Trump said. We did this in essentially 2 months. The investment pact includes U.S. defense sales valued at nearly $142 billion, providing that Saudi Arabia with state-of-the-art warfighting equipment and services from over a dozen U.S.-based defense firms. The deal also includes Saudi investment in American AI data centers, aerospace technology, energy infrastructure, and healthcare industries. The United Arab Emirates, or UAE, has also committed to a 10-year, $1.4 trillion investment framework in the United States after top UAE officials met with President Donald Trump during this trip. This framework will substantially increase the UAE's existing investments in the U.S. economy in AI infrastructure, semiconductors, energy, and manufacturing. Qatar's airline, Qatar Airways, also signed a deal on Wednesday to purchase jets from U.S. manufacturer Boeing during the president's visit. President Trump announced that deal alone was worth $200 billion and included 160 jets. This is the largest order of jets in the history of Boeing, and that's a good thing, the president says. So that's a record, and congratulations to Boeing. Get those planes out there. Get them out there. Typical of Donald Trump. Now, I would not be shocked with the Russians and the Ukrainians meeting in Turkey if President Donald Trump jumps over to Turkey to join those peace talks. I have no particular inside knowledge, but the only thing predictable about Donald J. Trump is he is completely and totally unpredictable. And he's about business. That would be restoring both security and prosperity to our allies and to ourselves. This is an unprecedented peace mission. Not since Nixon went to China has any president changed the entire face of our entire foreign policy, turning us away from the daisy chain of endless war to a future of peace, security, and, yes, prosperity. You're in the Stone Zone. Whatever you do, don't go away. When we come back, documentary filmmaker Joel Gilbert joins us to talk about the latest regarding New York Attorney General Letitia James.
The Stone Zone
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back. We are back in the Stone Zone. The Federal Housing Finance Agency of the U.S. government has sent a criminal referral to the Department of Justice regarding serial mortgage fraud by New York Attorney General Letitia James. Remember her? She's the one who said no one is above the law. Well, evidently that applies to her as well. In a multi-page complaint to the Department of Justice, the head of the FHFA outlined a series of serious mortgage fraud crimes. These are largely based on the work of two investigators, Joel Gilbert, an investigative journalist and film producer, documentary film producer, who joins us today, and Sam Antar, who writes the lively whitecollarfraud.com site. And they have documented, both of them, all of their findings. Joel Gilbert has produced a number of documentary feature films. He has a new one out regarding my good friend Roseanne Barr. We're going to ask him about that as well. But Joel Gilbert, welcome into the Stone Zone.
Okay, thanks, Roger. Great to be back.
So the Gateway Pundit, where you have published 50 days of your Letitia files, in my view, have helped restore justice in this country. She, of course, denies any wrongdoing. She hired the lawyer Abby Lowell, who last represented Hunter Biden, none too successfully, to deny everything. But the documents themselves don't lie. You have done yeoman's job of exposing a number of the major scandals here. I believe it was you, Joel, who first discovered that James had received back in 2011 a federally subsidized HAMP mortgage modification that required the property that you were getting a mortgage for to be no more than 4 residential units. Now, the official certificate of occupancy showed that the property in question had 5, and then Sam Antar's investigation revealed critical last-minute handwritten notations in the mortgage document, including the words, quote, "for fam" in one corner, and a contradictory note saying, quote, "not more than 6 residential units," suggesting a deliberate manipulation to maintain technical eligibility while creating plausible deniability about the property's true status. If I did this, they would charge me. Tell me what you have discovered in your latest piece, because there's a new Letitia James scandal brewing here.
Correct. In addition to the HAMP loan investigation, the one regarding the Norfolk property in Virginia, where she claimed to the lender that she would be her primary residence in order to get lower mortgage rates. I've taken a look at her estate filing in 1999. Her father died in 1986, Robert James, and that was 3 years after Letitia purchased a home with him, pretending to be his wife. They purchased a home in Queens, a small townhouse, and they applied for the mortgage as husband and wife. Now, I've written previously about how that was likely done because Letitia, 24 years old at the time, probably could not qualify for a loan and didn't have the income to do that. So that was in itself a form of mortgage fraud. You cannot misrepresent a relationship in order to get a mortgage. Now, her father dies in 1986. For some strange reason, I talk about this in my article today, it's very, very rare that a estate proceeding doesn't happen within a year or two of someone's death. But Letitia James waited 13 years, which is unheard of. I cite the fact that she didn't file any tax filings about her father's estate, and that she asked the court to give her father's interest in the townhome because she said that she could not inherit it unless the court gave her the tenancy and common rights. Now, really, she did have a joint tenancy because she applied for the mortgage as her father's wife. So she gets this grant from the probate court to give her, 13 years later, her father's interest in the townhome. Lo and behold, 1 year later in 2000, she sells the property as husband and wife, that Robert James is her husband, even though he's deceased and even though she inherited it. So I looked at these discrepancies in this estate, and I said, there's all kind of problems here. There's the delay, there's selling it as a husband and wife when you inherited it, the lack of any tax filings. And I'm saying that this 13-year difference and Letitia James' mishandling of her father's estate is kind of a bridge that shows how she was treating the law and treating her responsibilities as an attorney, and I believe she should be looked at. And the background of this, you might remember in 2016, Hillary Clinton introduced the term fake news into the 2016 campaign, and Donald Trump quickly took over that line and used it against the left. I think the breathtaking hypocrisy is what's driving this interest, because when Letitia James introduced the idea no one is above the law, she's the one that apparently has behaved as though she's been above the law in all of her real estate transactions for 40 years.
As I recall, the actual title on that property correctly records it as belonging to father and daughter, while the mortgage records the mortgage having been given to father, husband, and wife. Perfect example of fraud. If all three mortgages are considered, James is claiming $509,600 in mortgage debt on one Virginia property assessed at just $187,300, a loan-to-value ratio of 272%, far beyond any rational underwriting standard and likely impossible to obtain through legitimate lending channels. Now, Letitia claims 2 Fridays ago, I think it was, that when you and Sam Antar at whitecollarfraud.com visited her apartment building to confirm the number of units there and that she had, in fact, committed fraud, she said that you had been sent by Donald Trump. That's laughable. Sam Antar's not a Trump supporter. He's a Democrat, and his investigations are not politically based. And you weren't sent by Donald Trump, but you were there to videotape documentation of what you were saying. She claimed that she was at church when this happened. Do you think she was really at church?
Well, no, because Sam and I were there on a Friday afternoon. So we saw that Letitia went to the, Al Sharpton's National Action Network, which is very typical, I've noticed, going way back to Bill Clinton. When he was busted for the Monica Lewinsky scandal, he showed up at these black churches trying to cloak himself in this air of righteousness of people who are struggling for civil rights somehow that are being persecuted. So Letitia, I'm seeing, is following that same formula. She went to go to speak to the black community with these false claims that she was in church on a Friday afternoon and that somehow she's being persecuted. So she's getting more and more desperate. She hired this Democrat fixer attorney, Abby Lowell, who put out a letter to Pam Bondi, which was just a PR stunt. It had no legal substance whatsoever. He completely misstated the documents. He misunderstood the documents. And I think she's in big trouble. And the reason I went to her house is because of what she said. No one is above the law. And that's what Sam and I checked it out, and we confirmed our research that all of her real estate filings were fraudulent.
Public record because of the required disclosures that she must make as an elected official under New York state law. To me, the August 2023 act of signing a specific power of attorney in connection with the mortgage on a property in Norfolk, Virginia, claiming that it would be her, quote, principal residence, that was a legally binding statement that I think automatically vacated her position as New York Attorney General under Public Officers Law 30. This declaration came just 45 days before she launched her landmark civil fraud case against Donald Trump. It also potentially constitutes mortgage fraud under 18 U.S.C. 1014, which criminalizes false statements made to obtain a loan. This is a material problem for a couple of reasons. If she did move to Virginia, which of course she didn't, she's therefore ineligible to be Attorney General. And if she signed it and didn't move, then she's clearly guilty of mortgage fraud. Her excuse, or I should say her answer, both herself and by her lawyer, Abby Lowell, was that she had filed an additional application in which she was not required to live in the property to obtain the mortgage. There's no record of that. The New York Times wrote it as a fact without producing any such document. And these power of attorneys are signed at the conclusion of the mortgage transaction, not at the beginning. Right. It looks to me that she's trying to lie her way out of this.
Yeah, I can comment on that. What her attorney, Abby Lowell, said, this is Hunter Biden's attorney and Bob Menendez, Gold Bar Bob's attorney who's going to jail. What he did in his response that he made public to Pam Bondi, he said there's a couple of informal emails that Letitia sent where she said it would not be her primary residence. But that in no way negates the fact that in the mortgage document that the lender relied on to come up with their rates, that's the document they relied on to approve her mortgage. And he ignores that. The same thing with her apartment building in Brooklyn that I visited with Sam Antar. It's a 4-story building with 5 units legally, according to the certificate of occupancy. Sam and I measured the lower floor because she falsely claimed that it was only 3 stories. The lower floor, if it's 50% above ground, that's a floor. It's 87 inches above ground and only 16 inches below ground. So it's a 4-story house with 5 apartment units. Now, in his letter, he said, Letitia has informally been using this building as a 4-unit building for some years. It doesn't matter how you claim that you informally use it. It matters what the certificate of occupancy says, and that's the legal definition of that building. So in both cases, her attorney is simply saying there are informal things that were done that mitigate what she did illegally, and I don't think it's going to fly.
I just want to state for the record, everyone is, of course, innocent until proven guilty. There's a standing invitation to the Attorney General to appear here in the Stone Zone to defend herself. We would welcome that. Somehow I don't think she'll take us up on it, but the invitation is open. Now, there are reports that federal prosecutors have impaneled a grand jury in Virginia to look at the charges in that state. There's another Virginia property at question here, is there not?
Yeah, I looked at this foreclosure. Apparently, she has some cousins, the last name is Finney, that in Martinsville, Virginia, that had their property foreclosed on by Wells Fargo. So they recruited Letitia, apparently, who had some money, to buy back their foreclosed home from Wells Fargo Bank. So sure enough, in 2008, Letitia buys this foreclosure from the bank, and 3 weeks later is when the deed is then issued. And when the deed was issued, Letitia's name was not on the deed, and that's not legal. If she was a purchaser of the property, she should have showed up as someone on the deed, and then she would have had to sell the property to her cousins in some manner. There's no record of her ever selling the property. There's no record of her reporting this real estate acquisition or this real estate holding on her campaign finance forms. She may still own that property. So that's a big hole in reporting, and why she bought this property for her cousins but never appeared on the deed is definitely a type of mortgage infraction that has to also be looked at.
For anyone who thinks that we are nitpicking here, let me remind you that Letitia James indicted President Donald Trump in a civil action, claiming that he inflated the value of his assets in order to obtain commercial real estate loans that were paid back in full and on time, in which the lenders made $40 million in interest. In every one of those cases, the lenders testified that they had conducted their own due diligence as to the value of Trump's assets, that no bank, no lender would take the borrower's word for the value of their assets. They would be required, actually, to do their own due diligence to come up with a defensible number on which they felt comfortable making the loan. Letitia James says this is retribution, it's revenge, because she won I think it's a $580 million judgment. Let me give you a hint. I believe that judgment will be overturned. The appeals court has already hinted about it, and we will see this for what it is. Lawfare, politically motivated lawfare, designed to hurt Donald Trump and impoverish him going into the presidential election. Joel Gilbert is joining us today in the Stone Zone. He is the investigative journalist and documentary filmmaker based in Los Angeles, who's published a multi-part series for the Gateway Pundit on Letitia James. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about this, but I also want to talk to him about his upcoming documentary film regarding a very good friend of mine, Roseanne Barr. Whatever you do, please don't touch that dial. You're in the Stone Zone, and we'll be back with more politics, more news, more of Joel Gilbert on the other side.
The Stone Zone
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
We are back in the Stone Zone, and we're talking to Joel Gilbert, documentary filmmaker and investigative journalist, about his latest story at Gateway Pundit regarding New York Attorney General Letitia James. Now we get news that New York taxpayers may not be aware that well, they're going to be on the hook for Letitia James' legal bills. Kathy Hochul and Albany Democrats have passed a law that requires us, the taxpayers, to foot the bill for what I think are personal actions on her part. She is not charged for misconduct as New York Attorney General, although there are some issues regarding her personal expenses and travel that could lead to such charges. But in this case, all of the transactions that we're talking about here are personal financial transactions. Joel, should the taxpayers foot the bill for this?
This has caused a lot of outrage because Letitia James apparently got governor to put in the new budget that if anything has to do with Trump, that the state would cover her legal expenses. Now, people are outraged because the issues we brought up have nothing to do with and were prior to her even becoming Attorney General for the most part, except for one issue. So it's absurd. I think people are outraged, and Letitia James is being held up to the same standard that she established for Donald Trump, which is no one is above the law, and the state of New York should not have to pay her legal fees.
Yeah, it was amazing. Sam Antar uncovered the fact that between 2020 and 2021, the Attorney General's office spent $41,000 in taxpayer funds on private jet travel through a company called Venture Jets, a vendor used by no other state agency. Several flights coincide with James' campaign activities, including a trip to Martha's Vineyard and politically significant conference in Puerto Rico, where she was described as being fully in campaign mode. But then, according to Antar, there's nothing in state files to back up these expenditures. In other words, there's no trip itinerary, there's no explanation of who flew and why. These kind of luxury campaign spending with creative accounting, I think, violates state law and could yet be a problem for the Attorney General. Joel, when this is all over, is it your intention to make a documentary on Letitia James?
Well, I really could, because it's a pattern of 40 years. It's not like, oh, well, there's some expenses we're worried about on this airplane. It's a pattern. Every real estate transaction she does, every loan she takes, every interaction with relatives, the estate, with her niece, her cousins in Virginia, whatever she does, she appears to be crooked. So this would make a great film, but we don't know the ending yet. So I think I'm going to wait for the ending, and I'm thinking she'll probably be indicted based on what the evidence I've uncovered.
Joel, you have a very lively feed on X, formerly known as Twitter. Where can people find you? Joel
S. for Sam, Joel S. Gilbert, at Joel S. Gilbert. I put up all my latest articles on Gateway Pundit there almost every day.
I urge folks to check it out. Okay, we have about just 1 minute left. Your upcoming documentary on one of my all-time favorites, Roseanne Barr is America. Tell us quickly about it.
Yeah, RoseanneIsAmerica.com. RoseanneIsAmerica.com. Watch the trailer. It's coming out on 72 million homes, video on demand, another several million on live stream. We're screening it at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. on June 9. Roseanne's going to be there. Everyone's invited if you're in D.C., going to do a big Q&A. And Roseanne is a very important figure in America. This really tells her whole life story, including how she got essentially canceled for being a Trump supporter when they tried to say that she made a tweet that was racist, even though it wasn't, because they were out to get Trump. So she was kind of the first victim of cancel culture, where they cancel you for being a Trump supporter. And this film tells the whole real story about her life, how she became a Trump supporter, and what really happened and why they tried to get her out of Hollywood.
All right. We have to lend it there. Let me thank my guest, Joel Gilbert, documentary filmmaker and investigative journalist. And I look forward to your Roseanne film, Roseanne is America, because, well, I love Roseanne Barr. Thank you for joining us today in the Stone Zone. And until we meet again, God bless you and Godspeed.
Thanks for listening to The Stone Zone with Roger Stone. You can hear The Stone Zone with Roger Stone weeknights at 8 on 77 WABC. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode, so you never have to wonder,
what the heck is going on here?